How many times can you try to murder your husband before you finally succeed? For Kouri Richins, the answer was 3. Attempt 1, Greece. Mysterious food poisoning that put Eric in the hospital vomiting blood. Attempt 2. Valentine's Day 2022. A sandwich with a love note. Eric broke out in hives, lips swelling, heart racing, pulling his truck over on the side of the road thinking he was dying at 39 years old. He called his sister from that truck and said 5 words that would haunt her forever. I think she poisoned me. Attempt 3, March 3rd, 2022. A Moscow Mule. Eric's favorite drink. Except this time, Kouri didn't leave anything to chance. She crushed enough fentanyl into that copper mug to kill 5 grown men. And while Eric Richins suffocated in their bedroom, while his brain forgot to tell his lungs to breathe, while his 3 sons slept 20 feet away, his wife sat downstairs texting her lover. At 11:47 p.m., while Eric was dying, "Love you, baby." At 3:08 a.m., 4 hours later, she finally called 911. If you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Because what Kouri did in the 24 hours after Eric's death will make your blood run cold. The children's book she published, the mansion she closed on, the safe she stole, and the 3-word text that destroyed any chance she could claim this was an accident. February 14th, 2022. Valentine's Day morning in Francis, Utah, a mountain town where the Wasatch Range towers over homes built for families who thought they'd found paradise. Kouri Richins stood in her kitchen before sunrise, carefully preparing her husband's favorite sandwich from a local Kama's diner. She wrapped it with precision, included a love note, the kind of gesture that looks romantic from the outside, the kind that makes neighbors say what a devoted wife she must be. She placed it in Eric's truck before he woke up. A Valentine's surprise for the man she'd married, the father of her 3 boys, the 39-year-old who'd spent 15 years building a masonry business from nothing into a company worth $2 million. Eric found the sandwich during his lunch break at the work site. His crew watched him unwrap it, smile at the note from his wife. 1 bite, that's all it took. Within minutes, his skin erupted. Hives spreading across his arms, his chest, his face like wildfire. His lips swelling until he could barely form words. Heart hammering so violently against his ribs, he was certain it would burst through his chest. He pulled his truck to the side of the road, fumbling for his phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Not 911. Not his wife asking what was wrong. He called his sister Katie, because somewhere deep in his gut, Eric knew exactly what was happening. I can't breathe, he gasped into the phone, each word a struggle. Something's wrong. The sandwich Kouri made. Katie, I think she tried to poison me. Katie's blood turned to ice. Where are you? I'm calling an ambulance right now. No ambulance. You don't understand. If this gets reported, if there's paperwork, it becomes real. The boys, Katie. What happens to my boys if their mother goes to prison? Even choking, even dying, Eric was thinking about his 3 sons, about keeping their family intact, about protecting them from the truth about their mother. He fumbled in his truck for his son's EpiPen, kept there for emergencies that had never involved Eric himself because Eric had no food allergies. Never had. Not to anything. Not in 39 years of life. The epinephrine flooded his system, counteracting whatever poison Kouri had hidden in that sandwich. He drove himself home with vision blurring, chugged an entire bottle of Benadryl, and collapsed on the couch for hours while his body fought off whatever she'd given him. When he finally woke up, disoriented and terrified, he made another call, to a friend he trusted. You almost lost me today, for words that carried the weight of understanding. Someone had tried to kill him. Someone had come close to succeeding. But while Eric was fighting for his life on the side of that road, while he was stabbing himself with his son's EpiPen and downing Benadryl and wondering if he'd live to see his boys grow up, Kouri Richins was 3 towns over. Phone records would later show she spent the entire day with another man. Her lover, her paramour, the man she'd been texting in secret for months. The man she'd promised a future with once Eric was out of the way. She spent Valentine's Day in bed with him while her husband nearly died from the sandwich she'd prepared with such care that morning. February 15th, 2022. The day after Eric survived his wife's first real attempt, Kouri sent a text to her paramour that investigators would later find buried in her phone records, in messages she thought she deleted. If he could just go away, life would be so perfect. Not, I'm glad he's okay. Not, I was worried when he got sick. Not even a pretense of concern for the man she'd married, the father of her children. If he could just go away. Permanently. Eric didn't tell Kouri what he suspected. Didn't confront her about the sandwich. Didn't file a police report or seek medical documentation of what had happened. Because Eric Richins understood something that most people never have to learn. When you're married to someone who wants you dead, every move you make could trigger the action that kills you. He started taking precautions. Quiet precautions. The kind that wouldn't alert Kouri that he knew what she was capable of. In his safe at home, Eric had been collecting evidence for months. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals. Property documents proving Kouri had mortgaged his assets without permission. A $250,000 home equity line of credit she'd taken out using fraudulent power of attorney. Money she'd stolen from him and hidden in her failing real estate business. Eric had discovered that theft in October 2020. The discovery had triggered months of fighting. He demanded Kouri repay everything. Started quietly removing her from his accounts. Changed beneficiary designations on his life insurance policies. Begun the process of protecting himself financially. But he made one critical mistake. He didn't move fast enough. Because Kouri wasn't done trying. The Valentine's sandwich had failed. Eric had only taken one bite before his body reacted. Had saved himself before full absorption. She'd learned from that failure. Understood now that food wasn't reliable. He might taste something wrong. Might not eat enough. Might vomit before the poison did its work. Next time, she'd need a different delivery method. Something Eric would consume completely. Something liquid that would hide the taste. Something she could watch him drink to ensure he got every drop. Something like his favorite cocktail. February 26, 2022. 12 days after the Valentine's attempt failed, Kouri made a phone call that would later seal her fate. She called Carmen Lauber, the woman who cleaned her house twice a week, who trusted her wealthy employer, who had no idea she was about to become an accessory to murder. Kouri's voice on that call was calm, almost casual, like she was ordering groceries instead of planning a murder. Remember those pills from before? They weren't strong enough. I need you to get me some of the Michael Jackson stuff. Carmen understood immediately. This wasn't code, it was street slang. Michael Jackson stuff. M30S. Fentanyl. The pills that had allegedly killed the king of pop. The kind that could kill 5 men with a single dose. How much do you need? Carmen asked, already knowing this was wrong but needing the money too badly to say no. All of it. Everything you can get. And Carmen? I need it stronger this time. Much stronger. Carmen Lauber had been selling fentanyl pills in the Ogden area for years. A mother of 4 supplementing her income by dealing poison to people desperate enough to buy it. She'd sold to Kouri before, back in January, a batch of pills Kouri said she needed for pain management. But this request was different. Stronger. All of it. These weren't the words of someone managing chronic pain. These were the words of someone planning something terrible. Carmen procured the pills from her supplier. Left them at a fire pit at a house Kouri was flipping. A property in Heber City where they could make the exchange without being seen together. When Carmen arrived to make the drop, cash was already waiting. $1,500 bills tucked under a rock. 6 days later, Kouri paid Carmen with a $1,300 check from her business account, K. Richins Realty LLC, creating a paper trail that would eventually lead investigators straight to her door. But in that moment, riding high on the belief she was smarter than everyone else, Kouri wasn't worried about evidence. She was focused on one thing, making absolutely certain that this time Eric didn't survive. March 3, 2022, 9 p.m. the Richins' home in Francis, Utah. Eric came downstairs after changing out of his work clothes. His body ached the way it always did after a long day of physical labor at the masonry company he'd built from scratch over 15 years. 14-hour days of concrete and stone and sweat. A business that now employed a dozen workers and had just sold for $2 million. Kouri stood in the kitchen, a copper mug in her hands. Moscow Mule, Eric's favorite drink. Vodka, ginger beer, fresh lime juice served in the traditional copper vessel. The recipe she'd perfected over their years together. "Come celebrate with me," she said, smile bright, eyes flat and unreadable. "I closed on the Midway property today. We should toast." Eric's jaw clenched. The mansion. That goddamn mansion. The property was massive, 20,000 square feet of unfinished luxury sitting on prime land in Heber City, just outside Park City. An additional 4,000 square foot guest house. Purchase price, $2 million. Financed with $2.9 million in debt due in 6 months. Potential profit if they could finish and flip it, $12 million. Kouri had been obsessing over this deal for months. Saw it as her salvation. The one transaction that would save her drowning real estate business and make her wealthy beyond what Eric's masonry company could ever provide. Eric had told her no. Explicitly, repeatedly. Told his family that deal was not happening. Had planned to tell her tonight again that he absolutely would not sign those papers. That they couldn't afford it. That her business was already $1.8 million in debt. That she was making over 100 payments per month to various hard money lenders just to keep from defaulting. That her empire was collapsing and this mansion would only accelerate the crash. But standing there looking at his wife holding out his favorite drink after a long day, arguing felt exhausting. It was just a Moscow Mule. Just one drink. Eric took the mug, raised it to his lips, drank deeply. The fentanyl hit his bloodstream within seconds. Kouri hadn't left anything to chance this time. Not one pill crushed into powder. Not two. 15 pills, each one containing enough fentanyl to kill a grown man. Ground into fine powder and dissolved into that Moscow Mule. Also mixed in 16,000 nanograms per milliliter of quetiapine, an antipsychotic medication prescribed to Kouri for sleep but used here as a sedative. First knock him out, then kill him while he's unconscious. 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl. 67 nanograms per milliliter when 13 would kill a healthy adult. Eric's central nervous system didn't stand a chance. His breathing slowed within minutes, each breath shallower than the last. Heart rate dropping as his cardiovascular system struggled against the overwhelming chemical assault. Confusion creeping in, that terrible fog that comes when your brain is being starved of oxygen, when your body is forgetting the automatic functions that keep you alive. Did Eric understand, in those final moments, what was happening? Did he realize as the fog closed in that Kouri had finally succeeded where Greece and Valentine's Day had failed? Did he think about his 3 boys sleeping down the hall? Did he try to call for help but find his vocal cords wouldn't respond? Or did the quetiapine work fast enough that he simply felt drowsy, excused himself to bed, and died without ever knowing his wife had poisoned him? We'll never know Eric's final thoughts, his last moments of consciousness, whether he died afraid or simply slipped away into chemical unconsciousness before his body forgot how to breathe. But we know exactly what Kouri was thinking, because at 11:47 p.m., approximately 2 hours after Eric drank that poison, while he was upstairs alone suffocating in their bedroom, she pulled out her phone. Eric's 3 sons were sleeping 20 feet from their father's dying body. Ashton, the middle child, would later tell investigators he'd had nightmares that night, had cried out for his mother around midnight, had wondered why she didn't come, because Kouri was downstairs, phone in hand, texting her lover. 3 words that would later destroy any possibility she could claim this was an accident. Love you, baby. Not something's wrong with Eric. Not call 911. Not even a hint of panic or concern. Just casual affection to the man she'd been sleeping with for months. The man she'd promised a future with. The man she'd told just 2 days earlier, "Life is going to be different, I promise. Hang in there until Friday." Eric died on a Friday. Her phone glowed in the darkness of the kitchen. 11:47 p.m. Her paramour's response came quickly. He'd been waiting to hear from her, probably wondering how the celebration of the mansion closing was going. Paramour, love you too, baby. Tomorrow can't come soon enough. Can't wait to see you this weekend. He had no idea what was actually happening 20 feet above where Kouri sat. Had no idea Eric was upstairs dying. Had no idea he was texting with a woman who'd just committed murder. Kouri, love you, face blowing a kiss. That second text, sent at 11:52 p.m., would be the last message on her phone for over 3 hours. But her smartwatch told a different story. A story Kouri didn't know was being recorded with every step she took, every movement she made. The device logged constant activity throughout the house between 11:45 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. 250 feet of pacing, back and forth, kitchen to bedroom door, bedroom to hallway, hallway to boys' rooms. Not the frantic rushing of someone discovering their husband unconscious and trying to save him. Not the panicked movement of attempted CPR and calling for help. Just walking, methodical, checking, waiting, making absolutely certain Eric was dead before she called anyone. The watch unlocked 14 times during those hours. Each unlock triggered by movement. Kouri picking it up, checking the time, perhaps checking if enough time had passed. Perhaps wondering how long she needed to wait before discovering Eric's body to make it look believable. She would later tell police she was sleeping in their son Ashton's room during these hours, that he'd had nightmares, as he sometimes did, that she'd stayed with him, dozed off on his bedroom floor, didn't check on Eric until around 3 a.m., but her smartwatch proved she was lying. The device showed her standing outside the master bedroom at 2:54 a.m., showed her entering the room, showed her standing there for several minutes, long enough to check if Eric was breathing, to verify he was cold to the touch, to make certain the fentanyl had done its work. Then she returned to Ashton's room, set her phone alarm, waited exactly 14 more minutes. At 3:08 a.m., 4 hours and 21 minutes after sending that "love you, baby" text to her paramour, Kouri Richins finally dialed 911. The transformation was instant. The calm woman who'd been pacing her house for hours became a panicked wife who'd just discovered her husband dead. 911, what's your emergency? My husband. Kouri's voice carried perfect panic, every syllable calibrated for maximum effect. He's cold. He's so cold to the touch. Please, I think he's dead. The dispatcher's voice remained calm, professional, trained to talk people through the worst moments of their lives. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Is he breathing? No, there's no pulse. Oh God, there's blood. There's so much blood coming from his mouth. Have you performed CPR? Yes, I tried. But he's so cold and there's blood everywhere and I don't think it's working. The call lasted 6 minutes. Kouri crying, begging, choking on tears that sounded genuine enough to convince the dispatcher this was real grief. The operator kept her on the line, kept asking questions, kept trying to talk her through chest compressions. But Kouri wasn't actually doing CPR, wasn't actually trying to save Eric. She was performing, playing the role of devastated wife discovering her husband's unexpected death. When paramedics burst through the door at 3:30 a.m., they found Eric Richins dead in the master bedroom. Body temperature significantly dropped, rigor mortis beginning in his extremities, skin taking on the waxy appearance that comes hours after death. Every physiological sign indicating he'd been dead for at least 3 hours, possibly 4. Blood had pooled in Eric's mouth and nose, dark, thick, unmistakable. The kind of pulmonary hemorrhaging that happens with massive opioid overdose when the respiratory system completely shuts down and blood backs up into the lungs. Kouri stood in the hallway when they arrived, tears streaming down her face in artful rivulets, mascara smudged in exactly the right places, as if she'd been crying but not so much that she looked like a mess. Hair slightly disheveled but not chaotic. She changed clothes at some point, wore pajamas now instead of whatever she'd been wearing when she made Eric that drink. The lead paramedic, a veteran with 20 years of emergency response experience, looked at Eric's body, looked at all that blood, Looked at Kouri standing pristine in the hallway. Something was wrong. CPR is violent. It's messy. You're compressing a chest hard enough to break ribs, forcing air into lungs, often causing the victim to vomit or expel fluids. If Kouri had truly performed CPR on Eric as she claimed, that blood would be everywhere. Smeared on her hands, splattered on her clothes, spread across Eric's face from rescue breaths. Blood doesn't stay contained during CPR. Can't. But Kouri was pristine. Not a single drop on her. Not on her hands. Not on her pajamas. Not under her fingernails. The paramedic would later write in his report. It did not appear the wife had performed any CPR due to the large amount of blood that came from the victim's mouth, which would have transferred to her person during chest compressions or rescue breathing. "Ma'am," he said carefully, voice professional but skeptical. "When exactly did you find your husband?" Kouri's tears came harder right on cue. "Around midnight, maybe a little after. I'd been with my son Ashton in his room. He woke up with nightmares like he sometimes does. I fell asleep on his floor. When I came back to our bedroom, Eric wasn't breathing." The paramedic glanced at his watch. 3:30 a.m. And you called 911 at 3:08. That's over 3 hours between finding him and calling for help. "I didn't know what to do." Kouri's voice broke perfectly, shoulders shaking with sobs that looked genuine enough. "I was in shock. I kept thinking he'd wake up. I tried CPR, but I've never done it before and I don't think I was doing it right. I should have called sooner. God, I should have called sooner. This is my fault." She buried her face in her hands. The picture of a woman destroyed by grief and guilt and the trauma of finding her husband dead. One paramedic believed her performance, felt sympathy for this young widow who'd lost her husband so suddenly. The other didn't buy it for a second. But belief doesn't matter at a death scene. Evidence matters. Documentation matters. And they weren't investigators. Their job was to transport the body and file their report. They noted the time of death, estimated between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. based on body temperature, rigor mortis, and lividity patterns. Noted Kouri's statement about finding him around midnight. Noted the blood. Noted her claim of performing CPR. Noted everything they could observe. Then they prepared Eric's body for transport to the medical examiner. Detective Samuel Cartwright arrived as sunrise began painting the Wasatch Mountains in shades of gold and pink. Another beautiful Utah morning. Another day dawning on a family that would never be the same. 30 years investigating deaths in Summit County had given Cartwright instincts that rarely failed him. Pattern recognition built from hundreds of scenes, thousands of interviews, countless hours studying how people behave when tragedy strikes. This scene felt wrong from the moment he walked through that front door. Healthy 39-year-old men don't just die in their sleep. Not without warning signs. Not without underlying conditions. Not without something being seriously, obviously wrong. The 3-hour delay before calling 911 made no sense. Shock can paralyze people, yes. Trauma can make rational thought difficult. But for 3 hours? 3 hours of sitting with your dead husband before calling for help? And something about Kouri's performance bothered Cartwright on a visceral level. The grief was too perfect, too practiced. The tears came at exactly the right moments, when she needed to pause before answering a difficult question, when she needed to appear overwhelmed by emotion, when she needed to redirect attention from something she didn't want to discuss. She mentioned multiple times, unprompted, that Eric had no health problems, no heart disease, no medical conditions, nothing that could explain this sudden death, like she was establishing a narrative before anyone asked. Felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced what to say and when to cry. But suspicions aren't evidence. Gut feelings don't hold up in court. Cartwright needed facts, documentation, a trail he could follow from this bedroom to whatever really happened. He photographed everything. The position of Eric's body, the blood on the pillow, the Moscow Mule copper mug sitting on the kitchen counter, rinsed clean, the bedroom layout, the closets, the bathroom, every detail captured in high-resolution images that might matter later when defense attorneys tried to poke holes in the investigation. He asked Kouri to walk him through the evening. She did, voice shaking with what sounded like genuine emotion, pausing frequently to wipe tears from her eyes. "We were celebrating," she said, the word catching in her throat. "I just closed on a property we'd been working toward for months. The Midway Mansion. It's this beautiful estate that needs renovation but has incredible potential. Eric was so proud of me for making it happen." Cartwright wrote that down in his precise handwriting. Asked the next logical question. "What time did you make the drink for your husband?" "Around 9 p.m. A Moscow Mule, it was his absolute favorite. We toasted to the new property, to our future, to everything we were building together." Her voice broke on the word future. "Then I went upstairs to check on the boys. Ashton woke up crying about a nightmare, so I stayed with him." "What time was that? Maybe 9:30? I'm not entirely sure. I dozed off on his bedroom floor. When I woke up and came back to our bedroom around midnight..." "Eric," she couldn't finish the sentence. Let the tears do the talking. "And you attempted CPR?" "Yes, I tried so hard. But there was so much blood, and I don't know if I was doing it right, and he was already so cold." The sobs came harder now. "Should I have called sooner? Did I kill him by waiting? Oh God. Did I kill my husband by not calling fast enough?" Cartwright looked at her hands as she spoke, looked at her clothes. No blood, none at all. He asked about Eric's health, about enemies, about anyone who might want to hurt him. Kouri's answers were perfect, too perfect. Eric was beloved by everyone. Successful businessman, wonderful father, no enemies, no problems. This had to be his heart or something medical. Had to be. "Did your husband have any life insurance?" Cartwright asked, watching her face carefully. A flicker of something crossed Kouri's features. Too quick to identify, but definitely there. "Yes, a couple of policies through his business, I think." "Why? Does that matter?" "Just routine questions, ma'am. Trying to build a complete picture." Cartwright thanked her for her cooperation. Told her the medical examiner would perform an autopsy to determine cause of death. Said someone would be in touch as the investigation progressed. As he walked to his car in the cold March morning, he pulled out his phone and typed a note to himself. "Check financial records immediately. Check wife's background thoroughly. Check for insurance beneficiaries. Something very wrong here." He had no idea how right his instincts were. Had no idea that while he was documenting that scene, while Eric's body was being photographed and prepared for transport to the morgue, while 3 boys upstairs were about to wake up and learn their father would never come home, Kouri Richins was already executing the next phase of her plan. A plan she'd been preparing for months. A plan that required Eric to be dead before she could move forward. A plan that involved a $3.9 million mansion and a title company appointment she'd scheduled weeks ago. March 4th, 2022, 10 a.m., 22 hours after Eric Richins took his last breath. The medical examiner was beginning the preliminary external examination of Eric's body. His family, sisters Katie and Amy, his parents, extended relatives, were making frantic travel arrangements to get to Utah. His 3 boys were being told by Eric's mother that Daddy had gone to heaven. And Kouri Richins walked into a title company in Park City, Utah, dressed in business attire with her hair and makeup perfect. She was precisely on time, professional, organized, brought every required document in a folder she'd prepared in advance. Signed page after page, transferring $2.9 million in debt solely to her name. Finalizing the purchase of the mansion Eric had explicitly, repeatedly, absolutely forbidden her to buy. The title officer who handled the closing would later tell investigators it seemed completely routine. Just another real estate transaction on a Friday morning. The woman across the table showed no signs of distress. No red eyes from crying. No trembling hands. No mention that her husband had died less than a day ago. No explanation for why she was completing a major financial transaction while supposedly planning his funeral. Just business. Cold, calculated business. The officer had no idea the husband who was supposed to co-sign these documents was lying in the county morgue. Had no idea Kouri had used his death to close on a property he'd refused to approve while alive. Because for Kouri, Eric's death wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity. The solution to every problem she'd been facing. She signed the final document at 10:47 a.m., shook hands with the title officer, thanked him for his help, walked out of that office the sole owner of a property with $12 million profit potential. Then she drove to a liquor store, bought champagne, texted 3 friends, "Celebration at my house tonight. Big news to share." Later that day, while Eric's sisters were crying at the airport, while his boys were asking when Daddy was coming home, while the medical examiner was trying to determine what killed a perfectly healthy 39-year-old man, Kouri Richins threw a party. Witnesses would later describe it to investigators in detail. Music playing, Kouri laughing, dancing, toasting with champagne, celebrating the Midway mansion purchase, showing friends the property photos, talking about her vision for the renovation. Her husband had been dead for 36 hours. When one friend expressed concern, gently suggested maybe a celebration was inappropriate so soon after such a tragedy, Kouri waved her off with a smile. Eric would want me to celebrate. He was so proud of this deal. He'd want me to honor his memory by moving forward with our dreams. The friend left early, deeply disturbed by what she was witnessing. She'd later contact police and offer to testify about that party, about Kouri's behavior, about the cold calculation she'd seen in a woman who should have been destroyed by grief. But before any of that mattered, before the investigation could really begin, Detective Cartwright needed answers to the most basic question. What killed Eric Richins? March 7, 2022. The medical examiner began the full autopsy. External examination revealed nothing suspicious. No trauma, no defensive wounds, no ligature marks, no signs of struggle. Eric's body bore no marks of violence. Internal examination was equally unremarkable. Heart, normal size, healthy tissue, no disease. Lungs, clear, no infection, no tumors. Liver, kidneys, spleen, all functioning normally. No blockages in arteries. No aneurysms. No tumors. No disease. Every organ was exactly as it should be in a healthy 39-year-old man. The medical examiner was genuinely baffled. She'd been doing this for 15 years and had never seen a case quite like this. Perfect health. Sudden death. No explanation. She wrote in her preliminary report, cause of death, undetermined pending toxicology. Healthy adult male with no apparent pathology. But protocol required comprehensive toxicology screens. Blood and tissue samples were sent to the state lab for analysis, tests that would take 2 to 3 weeks to process. While the lab worked, while machines analyzed Eric's blood for every possible substance, Kouri began planning his funeral. She organized everything herself, chose an expensive casket, the second most costly option the funeral home offered, selected music Eric had loved, wrote an obituary in her own words that painted their marriage as a fairy tale. Eric Richins was a devoted husband and father who loved his family more than anything in the world. He built a successful masonry business through 15 years of hard work and dedication. He leaves behind his loving wife Kouri and their 3 precious sons. The funeral was held on March 12, 2022. Hundreds of mourners packed the church. Friends, family, business associates, people from their community who'd known Eric as a good man, a hard worker, a dedicated father. Kouri delivered the eulogy herself, stood at the podium in a black dress, voice breaking at exactly the right moments, and talked about her soulmate. Eric was my best friend, she said, dabbing at tears with a tissue. My partner in everything. We built a life together. Family. Future. I don't know how to exist in a world without him, but I know he's watching over us, over me, over our beautiful boys, and I'll make him proud by being strong, by continuing the work we started together. She cried, real tears streaming down her face. Whether they were tears of grief for a husband she'd loved or tears of relief that her plan had worked, no one could say. Eric's family sat in the front row watching this performance with mounting rage. Katie and Amy, Eric's sisters who knew about the Valentine's sandwich, who knew about the years of financial abuse, who knew their brother had been terrified of his wife, sat with fists clenched and jaws tight. They knew something was desperately wrong. Had known since February 14th when Eric called gasping for air and said, "I think she tried to poison me." But knowing and proving are two entirely different things. After the funeral, Kouri posted carefully curated photos on social media. Pictures of Eric with the boys at Christmas. Beach vacation photos from happier times. Images from their wedding day with captions about eternal love. "Missing you more than words can say. You were taken from us too soon. But our love will last forever. Until we meet again, my darling." Friends and acquaintances flooded the comments with sympathy. "So sorry for your loss. Eric was such a wonderful man. Praying for you and those precious boys." Kouri responded to every single comment, thanked everyone for their support, played the role of grieving widow with Oscar-worthy commitment. But behind the scenes, she was already moving on Eric's assets like a vulture on a fresh carcass. She contacted every life insurance company, filed claims on all 6 policies totaling nearly $3 million, expected quick payouts that would solve every financial problem she'd been drowning in for the past year. The insurance companies did something Kouri hadn't anticipated. They actually reviewed the policies before cutting checks. Every single policy listed someone other than Kouri as beneficiary. Eric had systematically removed her from everything in late 2021, right after discovering her $250,000 theft using fraudulent power of attorney. He changed beneficiary designations on all 6 policies, named his business partner on the largest one, named his sisters on others, named anyone but his wife. The policies wouldn't pay Kouri a single dollar. When the rejection letters arrived, witnesses said Kouri's rage was terrifying. She screamed at insurance company representatives over the phone, threw objects across her office, threatened lawsuits against everyone involved. She hired 3 different attorneys, filed legal claims arguing the beneficiary changes were invalid, that Eric had been coerced, that the changes violated their prenuptial agreement. Produced documents she claimed proved Eric wanted her to have the money. But the insurance companies had something more powerful than her lies. Eric's own records, his signature on every beneficiary change form, notarized documents, his attorney's detailed notes from October 2020 meetings explicitly stating client requests removal of spouse from all policies due to financial malfeasance and breach of trust. Email chains between Eric and his lawyer discussing how to protect his assets from my wife who has been stealing from me for years. The evidence was overwhelming. The lawsuits went nowhere. By mid-March 2022, 2 weeks after Eric's death, Kouri's financial situation hadn't improved at all. Eric was dead, but the money she'd killed him for wasn't coming. The life insurance was going to other people. Eric's will, which she didn't know he'd changed, left her nothing. The masonry business had sold for $2 million, but those proceeds went into Eric's estate, controlled by trustees who definitely weren't Kouri. She'd committed murder for money she would never see. Then, on March 21st, 2022, 17 days after Eric's death, everything changed. If you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Detective Cartwright's phone rang at 8:47 a.m. The state toxicology lab. Results were ready. He drove to the medical examiner's office, stomach tight with anticipation. Sat down across from Dr. Jennifer Chun, who'd performed Eric's autopsy. She slid a report across the desk. Cartwright read the first page, then read it again, then looked up at Dr. Chun to make absolutely certain he understood correctly. Fentanyl, 67 nanograms per milliliter in femoral blood, she said, her voice clinical but her eyes showing the same shock Cartwright felt. Lethal dose is approximately 13 nanograms per milliliter. Eric Richins had 5 times the lethal amount in his system when he died. Could this be recreational use? Maybe he didn't know how strong. No, Dr. Chun cut him off firmly. This concentration, combined with the second substance we found, proves this wasn't recreational. Look at line 42. Cartwright's eyes scanned down. Quetiapine, 16,000 nanograms per milliliter. What is that? An antipsychotic medication, also used as a sedative. prescribed to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, but commonly used off-label for sleep. These levels would render someone extremely drowsy, possibly unconscious. Someone gave him a sedative before administering the fentanyl. Exactly. First knocked him out, then killed him while he was unconscious. This wasn't someone taking pills recreationally and getting a hot dose. This was calculated murder. Dr. Chun pulled out her official findings. Handed Cartwright the amended death certificate. Cause of death, fentanyl toxicity. Manner of death, homicide. Eric Richins had been murdered. Cartwright sat in his car outside the medical examiner's office, hands gripping the steering wheel, processing what he now knew for certain. Someone had crushed at least 15 fentanyl pills, enough to kill 5 grown men, dissolved them into a drink, added sedatives to ensure the victim was unconscious, and watched Eric Richins die. This wasn't a crime of passion. Wasn't a sudden fight that got out of control. This was premeditated, calculated, cold-blooded murder. And Cartwright's instincts told him exactly who'd done it. Back at his desk, he started with the document that would explain everything. The prenuptial agreement Eric and Kouri had signed before their marriage. The prenup was 7 pages of dense legal language, but one section stood out like it had been written in neon. Wife shall have no right or claim to the business, properties, or assets acquired by husband prior to marriage or through inheritance, except that if husband should die prior to wife while the two are lawfully married, husband's partnership interest in said business shall transfer to the wife. Cartwright read it 3 times. The implications were staggering. If Eric divorced Kouri, she got nothing. The prenup was ironclad. After years of marriage, she'd walk away empty-handed. If Eric died while still married to Kouri, she got everything. The entire $2 million masonry business transferred to her automatically. That was motive, written in black and white, a financial arrangement that made Eric worth more dead than alive. Cartwright subpoenaed financial records for both Eric and Kouri, bank statements, credit reports, business accounts, tax returns, property records, every document that could show their true financial situation. What came back was financial catastrophe on Kouri's side and careful protection on Eric's. K. Richins Realty LLC. Kouri's business wasn't just struggling. It was a disaster held together with fraud and desperation. She owed $1.8 million to various hard money lenders across Utah and surrounding states. High-interest loans she'd taken out to fund property flips that never materialized. But the real shock was in the payment records. Kouri was making over 100 payments per month, 100 separate transactions to different lenders, juggling debt like a gambler at a rigged table, borrowing from one lender to make payments to another, each transaction digging the hole deeper. Her monthly debt service exceeded $250,000. Her business revenue in a good month might hit $170,000. The math didn't work, could never work. Foreclosure notices were piling up. Default judgments accumulating. Her empire was crumbling. By February 2022, the month she bought the fentanyl, Kouri's business was on the absolute precipice of total collapse. But Eric was worth something. 6 life insurance policies, the $2 million business, real estate equity, property assets. Dead, Eric solved all of Kouri's problems. Alive, he was the obstacle preventing her from accessing the wealth she believed she deserved. Cartwright found the smoking gun buried in property records from 2019. Kouri had obtained a $250,000 home equity line of credit against a property Eric owned before their marriage. Property the prenup specifically protected. Property she had no legal right to mortgage. She'd used a power of attorney Eric had signed years earlier, a document meant to help manage their shared rental properties, to access equity in his premarital home without his knowledge or consent. She stole $250,000 from him, hid it in her failing business, spent it desperately trying to prevent the collapse she knew was coming. Eric discovered the theft in October 2020. Bank statements finally revealed the unauthorized loan. The discovery triggered an explosion. According to witnesses Cartwright interviewed, Eric's business partner, his accountant, his attorney. The fights between Eric and Kouri became vicious after that discovery. Eric demanded full repayment immediately. Kouri claimed she'd used the money for family expenses and couldn't pay it back. Eric threatened legal action. Kouri threatened divorce. That's when Eric started protecting himself. October 2020, Eric removed Kouri's name from all joint bank accounts. November 2020, Eric changed beneficiary designations on all 6 life insurance policies. December 2020, Eric met with his estate attorney to draft a new will. January 2021, Eric executed the new will, completely excluding Kouri. Named his sister Katie as executor instead of his wife. The new will was brutally explicit. I specifically exclude my wife Kouri Richins from any inheritance due to ongoing financial disputes, breach of trust, and misappropriation of marital and separate property assets. Eric had literally written Kouri out of his future in legal language that left no room for interpretation. But he never told her, never confronted her with the changed will, never warned her she'd been cut out of everything. He was trying to protect himself quietly, securing his assets, documenting her theft, building a legal case while maintaining the appearance of normalcy, probably hoping he could get everything in order before filing for divorce, hoping to minimize conflict for the sake of their 3 boys. He underestimated how desperate Kouri had become. In January 2022, 2 months before Eric's death, Kouri made a move that showed exactly what she was planning. She logged into Eric's life insurance account using credentials she'd somehow obtained, changed the beneficiary on his largest policy from his business partner back to herself. Hit submit. The insurance company's fraud detection system flagged the change immediately. They notified Eric via email and text message. Beneficiary designation on policy number 847392 has been changed. If you did not authorize this change, contact us immediately. Eric called within hours. Furious, changed the designation back to his business partner, added 2-factor authentication to prevent Kouri from accessing his accounts again, documented the attempted fraud with his attorney. But that attempt told Cartwright everything about Kouri's state of mind in January 2022. She was repositioning assets, preparing for a big payday, trying to ensure that when Eric died, the money would flow to her. She just needed Eric to actually die. And she needed him to die before he filed for divorce. Cartwright found evidence Eric was planning exactly that. Notes from a February 1, 2022 meeting between Eric and his attorney showed Eric discussing divorce proceedings, asking about timelines, wanting to know how to protect his assets during the process. Client states marriage is over. The attorney had written, concerned about wife's access to business assets and property. Wants to ensure she receives nothing beyond minimum legal requirement given prenuptial agreement. Discussed strategy for filing. Client will make decision after finalizing current real estate transaction. The real estate transaction was the Midway mansion Kouri was trying to close. Eric planned to tell Kouri absolutely not, then file for divorce immediately after. But Kouri found out. Somehow discovered Eric was meeting with divorce attorneys. Maybe she'd been monitoring his calendar. Maybe she'd followed him. Maybe she'd found documents he'd left in his office. However she discovered it, she knew her time was running out. If Eric filed for divorce, the prenup meant she'd get nothing. Her business would collapse. Creditors would seize everything. She'd be left with massive debt. No income, no prospects, unless Eric died first. If he died while they were still married, she'd inherit the business per the prenup, would have access to properties they owned jointly, could claim the mansion was a marital asset purchased before his death, could fight for the life insurance if she could prove the beneficiary changes were invalid. Dead, Eric was the solution to every problem destroying her life. Alive, he was the problem. So Kouri made a choice, and she wasn't making that choice alone. Cartwright found the text messages on March 24th. Buried in phone records the company had provided under subpoena. Messages between Kouri and a contact saved only as smiling face with smiling eyes. The emoji contact was a man, not Eric. Someone Kouri had been communicating with for at least 8 months, possibly longer. Earlier messages had been deleted, but enough remained to tell the story. An affair. paramour, a lover she'd been promising a future with. The messages Cartwright recovered were damning. October 15th, 2021. Kouri. If I was divorced right now and asked you to marry me tomorrow, you would? Paramour. You know I would. In a heartbeat, baby. Kouri. I just want to lay on the couch and cuddle you. Watch a murder documentary and snuggle. A murder documentary. The irony wasn't lost on Cartwright. November 3rd, 2021. Kouri. I want you today, every day. Not just sexually, but physically, mentally, emotionally. I want all of you. Paramour. Soon, baby. Soon. Be patient. These things take time. Kouri. I'm tired of being patient. I want to wake up next to you every morning. By February 2022, Kouri's messages became more desperate, more explicit about what she wanted. February 15th, 2022, the day after the Valentine's poisoning attempt. Kouri. If he could just go away and you could just be here, life would be so perfect. Paramour. I know, baby. I know it's hard, but we have to be smart about this. Kouri. I am being smart. Trust me. What did being smart mean? Was her paramour aware of what Kouri was planning? Was he encouraging her? Or was he simply a self-centered man having an affair with a married woman, not thinking too deeply about the implications? Cartwright would spend months trying to answer those questions. February 19th, 2022. Kouri. Life is going to be different. I promise you. Just a little longer. Paramour. I trust you, baby. March 2nd, 2022. 2 days before Eric died. Kouri. Life is going to be different, I promise. Hang in there until Friday. After Friday, everything changes. Paramour. Friday? What happens Friday? Kouri. You'll see. Just trust me. By this weekend, we'll be able to start planning our real future. Eric died on Friday, March 3rd, 2022. Cartwright found travel reservations in Kouri's email. Booked on February 20th, 2022, 12 days before Eric's death. 5 nights at Secret's St. Martin Resort and Spa. An all-inclusive romantic getaway in the Caribbean. Departure date, April 15th, 2022. 2 adults. Ocean View Suite. Couple spa package. Not for her and Eric. For her and her paramour. She'd booked her honeymoon with her lover while her husband was still alive. While she was actively planning his murder. The night Eric died, while he was upstairs suffocating from 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl, her paramour texted her a photo of 2 people kissing on a beach at sunset. Caption. Soon, baby. Soon this will be us. Love you. Over an hour later, at 11:47 p.m., Kouri responded, Love you, face blowing a kiss. 20 feet away, Eric was dying. His brain forgetting how to tell his lungs to breathe. His 3 sons sleeping down the hall, about to wake up fatherless. And Kouri was texting her lover. But Cartwright needed more than motive and opportunity. He needed to prove Kouri had the means to commit this murder. Needed to trace where she got the fentanyl that killed Eric. The answer was in her phone. In messages she thought she'd deleted but the phone company had preserved. Messages to a contact saved as CL. Carmen Lauber's name appeared in Kouri's text messages starting in January 2022. The housekeeper who cleaned the Richins home twice a week. A mother of 4 struggling to make ends meet. A woman with a secret side business selling fentanyl pills in the Ogden area. The messages between Kouri and Carmen were coded, obviously attempting to avoid explicitly naming what they were discussing, but transparent to anyone familiar with drug transactions. January 16th, 2022. Kouri. Do you have any of Michael's stuff? Carmen. I can get some. How much you need? Kouri. As much as you can get me. Like 30 or 40 if possible. Michael's stuff. Street slang for fentanyl pills. M30S. Blues. Pills pressed to look like legitimate oxycodone but containing lethal doses of synthetic opioid manufactured in clandestine labs. Carmen later told investigators this first request hadn't seemed unusual. Plenty of her clients bought in bulk. She assumed Kouri had chronic pain and wanted to stock up. The rich always wanted to have plenty on hand. They arranged a meeting. Parking lot behind a Walmart in Ogden. Kouri drove there on January 18th. Her phone's GPS data placed her at that exact location at 2:47 p.m. Met Carmen's car. Money exchanged through windows. Small plastic bag passed over. 30 fentanyl pills. $900 cash. Kouri drove home with enough poison to kill 15 people. But one purchase wasn't enough for what Kouri was planning. February 11th, 2022, 3 days before Valentine's Day. Kouri, I need more of Michael's stuff. Can you get it stronger this time? Carmen, how strong are we talking? Kouri, as strong as possible. The first batch wasn't quite right. That message wasn't quite right. Made Carmen nervous enough to mention it to her supplier. What did not quite right mean? Too weak for pain management? Or not lethal enough for something else? But Carmen needed the money too badly to refuse the sale. Carmen, I can get you pharmaceutical grade. Real deal. But it's going to cost more. Kouri, I don't care about cost. Get me the strongest you have. At least 40 pills. Another parking lot meeting. February 12th, 2022. This time Carmen brought pills with higher fentanyl concentrations. Each one potentially lethal on its own. 40 pills. $1,300. Kouri drove home with enough poison to kill 20 people. 2 days later, Eric nearly died from the Valentine's sandwich. When that attempt failed, when Eric only took one bite before his body reacted violently enough to save him, Kouri learned a critical lesson. Ingestion through food wasn't reliable. He might taste something wrong, might not eat enough, might vomit before full absorption. She needed better control over dosage and delivery. The text to Carmen came 2 weeks later. February 27th, 2022, 4 days before Eric died. Kouri, I need Michael's stuff ASAP. This is urgent. Carmen, how much? Kouri, a lot. Like enough for. Just get me as much as you possibly can. Money isn't an issue. Carmen would later testify about what happened next. About the phone call that followed that text message. About the words that made her realize she might be participating in something terrible. She called me that night, Carmen told investigators, her voice shaking as she relived the conversation. Said she needed the pills within 24 hours. I asked what was going on, if everything was okay. And she asked me. Carmen paused, tears streaming down her face. She asked me how much would kill someone. Cartwright leaned forward. What exactly did she say? She said, hypothetically, if someone wanted to make sure someone else didn't wake up, how many pills would that take? I told her it depends on tolerance, but probably 15 to 20 pills crushed up and ingested all at once would be fatal for someone without opioid tolerance. And she said, Carmen's voice dropped to a whisper. She said, give me double that amount. 40 pills. Enough to kill multiple people. Kouri wanted double the lethal dose to make absolutely certain there'd be no survival this time. But Kouri had learned from her previous mistakes. The first 2 drug purchases had created a trail. Her phone placed her at both transaction locations. If anyone ever investigated, they'd trace her directly to the drug dealer. So for this final purchase, Kouri recruited someone innocent. Someone who wouldn't ask questions. Someone who trusted her completely. CL. The initials investigators used to protect the identity of Kouri's other housekeeper. A young woman who cleaned houses to support her family. Who had no criminal record. Who had no idea she was about to become an accessory to murder. Kouri approached her on February 28, 2022. I need a favor, Kouri said, voice casual friendly. Can you pick something up for me in Ogden? From a friend? I'm too busy with the mansion closing and I really need this today. The housekeeper agreed. Why wouldn't she? Kouri was her employer. Paid well. Seemed nice. This was just a favor. Kouri gave her Carmen's address and specific instructions. Ask for a package. She'll know what I mean. Here's $1,500 in cash to pay her. The housekeeper drove to Ogden that afternoon. Met Carmen at her house. Picked up a small package wrapped in plastic. Brought it back to Kouri. She had no idea the package contained 40 fentanyl pills. Had no idea those pills would kill Eric Richins within days. Had no idea Kouri had used her as a buffer. Plausible deniability if anyone ever investigated the source of the fentanyl. When investigators eventually interviewed the housekeeper weeks later, she broke down completely. Kouri had manipulated her, used her, positioned her as an unwitting participant in murder. But Kouri had made a critical mistake. She'd texted Carmen to confirm the pickup. Those texts were on Kouri's phone, and they proved she'd orchestrated the final drug purchase that provided the poison used to murder Eric. February 28, 2022, 4:17 p.m. Kouri, did she pick it up? Carmen, yes, all set. Kouri, perfect. I'll send you a check this week. And she did. March 4th, 2022, the day after Eric died, the same day she closed on the mansion, Kouri wrote Carmen a $1,300 check from K. Richins Realty LLC, creating a paper trail that would eventually lead investigators straight to her. By late April 2022, Cartwright had built a substantial case. Motive: prenup giving Kouri nothing in divorce but everything if Eric died. $1.8 million in business debt. Imminent financial collapse. 3 separate fentanyl purchases from Carmen Lauber, including one where Kouri explicitly asked, how much would kill someone? Kouri made the Moscow Mule herself. Was alone with Eric when he drank it. Waited 4 hours before calling 911. 5 times lethal dose of fentanyl plus sedatives in Eric's system. Text to paramour while Eric was dying. Mansion closing 22 hours later. He reached out to Carmen Lauber, offered her immunity in exchange for truthful testimony. The alternative: accessory to murder charges carrying 15 to life. Carmen took the deal within hours. She'd made terrible choices selling drugs, but she wasn't going to prison for Kouri Richins' murder. In her formal statement, Carmen confirmed multiple drug sales to Kouri starting in January. Kouri specifically requesting stronger pills after the first purchase. Kouri asking how much would kill someone. The instruction to give her double that amount. And one detail that would prove devastating at trial: she told me the first pills weren't strong enough, like she'd already tried them and they didn't work. The Valentine's sandwich. Carmen's testimony proved Kouri had tried to poison Eric before March 3rd. Proved this was her second attempt. Proved premeditation stretching back months. Now Cartwright needed just one more piece: Eric's voice. Evidence from the victim himself proving he knew his wife was trying to kill him. That evidence existed, hidden where Kouri couldn't destroy it. But first she'd try. As we continue, like, share, subscribe now and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. May 8th, 2022, 2 months after Eric's death. Katie Richins Benson's phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Her father's voice was shaking. Someone broke into the house last night. They didn't take the TV, didn't take jewelry, didn't take cash I had in the bedroom. They only took one thing. Katie's stomach dropped before he even said it. Eric's gun safe, the one we were storing in the garage. Katie was already grabbing her keys, already heading for her car. I'm on my way. Don't touch anything. I'm calling the police. The safe had been in their father's garage since Eric's death. Temporary storage while the estate was being settled. Contained firearms, yes. But more importantly, it held documents Eric had been collecting for months. Financial records proving Kouri's theft. Property deeds showing unauthorized mortgages. Bank statements Eric's attorney had told him to preserve. Evidence Eric had been gathering in preparation for divorce proceedings. And something else. Something Eric had told Katie about but never shown her. A note, written in his own hand, dated January 2022. If anything happens to me, look at Kouri. Katie knew immediately who'd taken the safe. Knew with absolute certainty. She drove straight to the Richins home, called Detective Cartwright on the way. He told her to wait for backup. She ignored him. When Katie pulled into the driveway, she could see through the garage window. And there, sitting in plain sight like Kouri didn't even care about hiding her theft, was Eric's gun safe. Katie got out of her car, walked to the side garage door, tried the handle. Unlocked. She walked in. Kouri was standing next to the safe, bolt cutters in her hand, clearly attempting to break the lock. "That's Eric's safe," Katie said, voice deadly calm despite fury flooding every nerve ending. "You stole it from my father's house. That's a felony." Kouri's face went blank. Then something shifted in her eyes. Something cold and calculated and absolutely terrifying. She didn't deny the theft, didn't make excuses, didn't try to explain. She set down the bolt cutters, walked directly toward Katie, and punched her in the face. The first blow connected with Katie's jaw hard enough to snap her head back. Before Katie could react, Kouri hit her again, and again, fists flying with rage that seemed inhuman. Katie tried to defend herself, but Kouri had surprise and momentum. She was on top of Katie, punching her face, her neck, her shoulders. Screaming words Katie couldn't process through the shock and pain. Eric's mother heard the commotion from inside the house, came running, started pulling at Kouri, trying to get her off Katie. Wasn't strong enough. A neighbor heard screaming, came over, started pulling. It took 4 people to finally drag Kouri off Katie. 4 adults using all their strength to separate her from Eric's sister. Katie would later testify about what she saw in those moments. "I will never forget the look in her eyes. Pure rage. Like she wanted to kill me too. Like I was just another obstacle she needed to eliminate." Police arrived within minutes. Kouri was arrested for assault. The safe was seized as evidence. Katie was treated for facial contusions and a possible concussion. Kouri pleaded no contest to the assault charge weeks later. Received probation. But the safe itself was what mattered. When investigators recovered it and brought a locksmith to open it, Kouri had damaged the lock with her bolt cutters but hadn't gotten it open. They found everything Eric had preserved. Printouts of bank statements highlighting unauthorized withdrawals. The $250,000 HELIC documents showing Kouri's forged signature authorizing the loan. Property records with discrepancies. Tax returns showing cash transfers Kouri couldn't explain. Letters from Eric's attorney dated October through December 2020 detailing ongoing financial malfeasance by spouse including but not limited to unauthorized loans, fraudulent use of power of attorney, misappropriation of business funds, and systematic theft of marital assets. Everything Kouri had wanted to destroy. Everything that proved she'd been stealing from Eric for years. And then, at the very bottom of the safe, beneath all the financial documents, Detective Cartwright found a manila envelope. Inside, a handwritten note from Eric, dated January 15, 2022, 7 weeks before his death. The handwriting was shaky, like Eric had been emotional while writing it. But the words were clear. "If anything happens to me, if I die unexpectedly or in circumstances that seem suspicious, please investigate Kouri. She has been trying to hurt me. The sandwich on Valentine's Day 2022 made me violently ill. I believe she put something in it. Years ago in Greece, I got severely sick after she gave me a drink. I thought it was food poisoning then, but now I'm not sure. She wants me gone because of money, because I discovered she stole $250,000 from me, because I changed my will and cut her out, because I'm planning to file for divorce and the prenup means she gets nothing. I'm writing this because I'm genuinely afraid she's going to kill me. I've started being careful about what I eat and drink. I don't leave her alone in the kitchen when food is being prepared, but I can't protect myself every second. If I die unexpectedly, she did it. Please don't let her get away with this. Please protect my boys from her. Eric Richins." The note was signed, dated, witnessed by Eric's attorney, whose signature appeared at the bottom with a notary stamp. Legal documentation that Eric feared for his life from his own wife, that he'd predicted his own murder, that he'd identified his killer 7 weeks before she succeeded. Cartwright sat in the evidence room holding that note, reading it over and over. Eric's voice from beyond the grave, a dead man testifying against his murderer. He now had everything needed for an arrest. Motive, prenup, financial collapse, divorce threat. Means, fentanyl from Carmen, repeated purchases. Opportunity, made the drink, 4-hour delay. Eric's toxicology. 5 times lethal dose. Kouri's texts. Love you, baby, while Eric died. Kouri's actions. Mansion closing. Celebration party. Carmen's testimony. How much would kill someone? Eric's note. If I die unexpectedly, she did it. August 15th, 2022, 5 months after Eric's death. Prosecutors presented the case to a grand jury in Summit County. 23 citizens listened to 3 days of testimony. Heard from Carmen Lauber about selling fentanyl to Kouri. Heard from the medical examiner about the lethal dose in Eric's system. Heard from Katie about the Valentine's sandwich phone call. Saw the text messages to the paramour. Saw Eric's note predicting his own murder. The grand jury deliberated for 90 minutes. They returned indictments on 11 counts. First-degree aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, Valentine's Day, 3 counts of insurance fraud, 2 counts of mortgage fraud, forgery, drug distribution, witness tampering, assault against Katie. Additionally, prosecutors filed 26 separate charges related to mortgage fraud Kouri had committed in 2021. Fraudulent loan applications, forged documents, false statements to lenders. In total, 37 criminal charges. If convicted on all counts, Kouri faced life in prison without possibility of parole. May 8, 2023, 14 months after Eric's death, exactly 1 year after the safe theft, Summit County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the Richins home at 6:30 a.m. with an arrest warrant. Kouri answered the door in pajamas. Hair perfect, makeup already done even though it was barely sunrise. She looked at the deputies without surprise, like she'd been expecting this. Kouri Richins, you're under arrest for the murder of Eric Richins. She didn't resist, didn't ask questions, didn't demand to call an attorney, just held out her wrists for handcuffs with that same blank expression she'd worn through Eric's funeral. As deputies walked her to their vehicle, Kouri looked back at the house one time, at the home she'd shared with Eric, at the place where she'd poisoned him, at the life she'd built and destroyed. Then she got in the patrol car without a word. But Kouri had done something in the year between Eric's death and her arrest. Something so calculated, so coldly manipulative, it would shock even seasoned investigators who thought they'd seen everything. She'd written a children's book about Eric's death, and promoted it on television as a grieving widow helping other families cope with loss. March 2023, exactly 1 year after Eric's death, 1 month before Kouri's arrest. The book was titled, Are You With Me? Self-published through Amazon KDP. The cover showed a father with angel wings and a glowing golden halo, watching over his grieving family from heaven. The illustration clearly resembled Eric, dark hair, strong athletic build, kind eyes. Inside, a widow and her 3 young sons struggled to understand where Daddy had gone. The children asked questions. Where is Daddy now? Can he see us? Does he know we miss him? The Father's Spirit answered from heaven. I'm always with you, watching over you every single day, protecting you from harm, loving you forever. The dedication page read, To my amazing husband and wonderful father Eric, we miss you, we love you, and we know you are watching over us. Until we meet again in heaven, my darling. Kouri scheduled a media tour across Utah. Local news stations, morning shows, podcasts about grief and healing. She appeared on Good Things Utah, Fox 13, KSL, every outlet that would have her. She sat in tastefully decorated studios wearing conservative clothing, black or navy, nothing flashy. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back simply. The picture of a grieving widow who channeled her pain into helping others. They kept asking where Daddy was. Kouri told a Good Things Utah host, her voice practiced with exactly the right amount of emotion. If he could still see them, if he knew they missed him, I wanted to give them, and other children dealing with sudden loss, a way to understand that our loved ones never truly leave us. The host nodded sympathetically. It must have been so difficult writing this, taking you back to that painful time. It was, Kouri said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd brought. My husband passed away unexpectedly last year. Heart issues, the doctors think, though we never got a definitive answer. completely took us all by shock. Eric was only 39, perfectly healthy. Then one morning he just didn't wake up. Lie after lie delivered with perfect conviction. No mention of fentanyl, no mention of the 4-hour delay, and was under investigation. Just a widow sharing her grief journey with the world. Writing this book helped us heal, Kouri continued. Helped my boys process their feelings. And I hope it helps other families going through similar tragedy. The book sold moderately well on Amazon. Reviews poured in from people who had no idea they were buying a murder confession disguised as a children's book. Beautiful and comforting. Helped my daughter understand where her grandfather went. As a widow myself, this book spoke to my soul. Thank you for sharing your story. Such a brave woman to turn her pain into something that helps others. Kouri responded to every review, thanked every reader, played the role of grateful author helping grieving families. She announced plans for a sequel. Mom, How Far Away is Heaven? Already in development. An entire series about processing grief, with Kouri positioned as an authority on surviving sudden loss. Book signings were scheduled at local bookstores. Kouri would sit at a table, smiling, signing copies, chatting with readers about loss and healing and keeping loved ones' memories alive. Eric would be so proud of this, she told one customer. He always encouraged me to write, to share our story. This is for him. But while Kouri smiled for cameras and signed books and gave interviews about her healing journey, Detective Cartwright was reviewing evidence that would destroy her grieving widow act completely. Her Google search history. Forensic analysts had recovered everything from Kouri's iPhone and laptop. Searches she thought she deleted. Browser history she tried to erase. Digital evidence preserved on Apple servers even after she'd factory reset her devices. The searches painted a picture of someone who wasn't grieving. Someone who was planning. February 2022. Before Eric died. February 8th. What is a lethal dose of fentanyl? February 9th. How long does fentanyl take to kill someone? February 10th. Can you overdose on fentanyl in a drink? February 12th. How to crush pills into fine powder? February 26th. Do autopsy tests check for fentanyl? February 28th. How long does fentanyl stay in system after death? March 1st. If someone dies at home, do police investigate? March 2nd. What happens when you call 911 for death at home? She'd been researching murder methods, researching how to avoid detection, planning every detail before she ever crushed those pills into Eric's Moscow Mule. March 4th, 6:47 a.m. Death certificate says pending, will life insurance still pay? March 4th, 7:15 a.m. If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on death certificate as? March 4th, 8:33 a.m. How long does toxicology take on autopsy? She wasn't grieving that morning. She was calculating, trying to figure out if her plan would work, if she'd get the money before getting caught. March 2022, weeks after Eric died. March 15th, luxury prisons for the rich in America. March 16th, what is the most comfortable prison in America? March 18th, federal prison versus state prison, which is better? If you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell. March 22nd, Utah State Prison Timpanogos Women's Facility. March 25th, can you have a private cell in prison? She'd been researching where she'd serve time if convicted, planning her prison stay like other people plan vacations. So confident she'd get away with it that she was literally shopping for the nicest possible facility. April 2022. April 3rd. How to permanently delete information from iPhone remotely. April 5th. Can deleted text messages be recovered by police? April 7th. Does factory reset really delete everything? April 10th. Can police recover deleted photos from iPhone? Trying to cover her tracks. Too late, the phone company had already preserved everything. May 2022. May 2nd. Can cops force you to do a lie detector test? May 5th. Do you have to answer police questions without lawyer? May 8th. Signs of being under federal investigation. May 12th. What triggers a federal investigation? May 20th. How do police build murder cases? And perhaps most damning, June 2022. June 3rd. Kouri Richins, net worth. June 5th. How much is Kouri Richins worth? June 10th. Kouri Richins, real estate mogul. She'd been Googling herself, checking to see what the internet said about her wealth, monitoring her own reputation before there even was a public case against her. The searches showed consciousness of guilt, showed premeditation, showed someone who knew exactly what they'd done and was actively trying to avoid consequences. But Kouri's most damaging decision came after her arrest. September 2023. For months into her incarceration at Summit County Jail, awaiting trial, bail repeatedly denied due to flight risk and danger to witnesses. Deputies conducting a routine cell search found a 6-page handwritten letter hidden inside an LSAT prep book Kouri had checked out from the jail library. The letter was addressed to her brother Ronnie. Instructions, detailed, explicit instructions for him to commit perjury on her behalf. "Walk the dog," was written at the top in Kouri's handwriting. Some kind of code between siblings, investigators assumed. The letter laid out a complete false narrative. Tell them Eric went to Mexico in February 2022, that he was acting secretive about it, that when he came back he seemed different, anxious, paranoid. Tell them you saw him with pills. Small blue pills, he said, were for pain, that you asked him about them and he got defensive. Tell them Eric told you he bought them from someone in Mexico, that he said they were cheaper than getting a prescription here. Tell them you were worried about him, that you thought he might have a problem. Reword this however you need to make the point. Just include it all. Make it sound natural, like you're remembering things that really happened. This is important. They're trying to say I gave him the drugs. We need them to believe he got them himself, that his death was accidental. An overdose from pills he bought in Mexico. I'm counting on you. Please don't let me down. The letter went on for 6 pages. Detailed instructions about what to say, how to say it, when to volunteer information versus wait to be asked. It was a roadmap for manufacturing false testimony, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, another felony to add to Kouri's growing list. When confronted about the letter, Kouri's excuse was absurd. It's research for a fictional mystery book I'm writing, about a woman who goes to Mexico to investigate drugs after her husband dies from an overdose. I'm working on character development. The letter is from the main character to her brother in the story. Nobody believed her. Not the jail administrators. Not the prosecutors. Not even her own defense attorneys, who privately begged her to stop making things worse. She was placed in 30-day lockdown as punishment. Lost privileges. But more importantly, the letter became evidence. Proof that even from jail, even facing life in prison, Kouri was still trying to manipulate the system. Still lying. Still scheming. Still trying to escape justice. The trial was scheduled for February 2026. 3 years between arrest and trial. Standard delays from pretrial motions, discovery battles, legal maneuvering from both sides. Kouri's defense team filed motion after motion trying to get evidence excluded, trying to prevent Carmen's testimony, trying to keep out the jailhouse letter, trying to suppress the Google searches. Every motion was denied. They argued everything was circumstantial. Yes, she bought fentanyl. Doesn't mean she put it in Eric's drink. Yes, she texted her lover. Doesn't prove murder. Yes, she closed on the mansion. She was trying to save her business. But prosecutors had something defense couldn't explain away. Something that tied every piece of evidence together into an unbreakable chain. Eric's note. If I die unexpectedly, she did it. A dead man identifying his killer. From beyond the grave. In his own handwriting. January 2026. 1 month before trial. Prosecutors filed their final piece of evidence. Something Kouri had done that proved she'd been planning Eric's murder for longer than anyone realized. The evidence came from Kouri's personal journals. 5 notebooks seized from the Richins home during the initial search warrant execution. Leather-bound journals where Kouri had been recording her thoughts for years. prosecutors had them analyzed by a forensic document examiner to verify the handwriting and dating. Everything authenticated. Everything admissible. The entries showed this wasn't a sudden decision. Wasn't a moment of desperation. This was years of resentment building into murderous intent. August 2019. Sometimes I imagine what life would be like if Eric just wasn't here anymore. If I could start over. Be free. Build the business the way I want without him questioning every decision. Without him controlling the money. March 2020. He's suffocating me, questioning every purchase, monitoring every transaction. It's my business, but he acts like it's his money I'm spending. Like I'm not entitled to build something for myself. October 2020, right after Eric discovered the $250,000 theft. He found out about the Helic. Now he's threatening lawyers. Threatening to protect his assets. Like I'm the enemy. After everything I've sacrificed for this family. After giving up my career to raise his children. The business is failing because of his interference. His constant criticism. His refusal to let me make decisions. Everything would be better if I could run it myself. Without him. January 2021. He changed the will. Katie told me by accident. Didn't realize I didn't know. He cut me out completely. After 15 years of marriage. After 3 children. After everything I've done. The prenup means I get nothing in divorce. The new will means I get nothing if he dies. He's trapped me. Made sure I'm completely dependent on him. And now he's taking even that away. April 2021. I hate him. I actually hate him. He controls everything. The money, the house, the kids. My entire life revolves around what Eric wants. What Eric approves of. What Eric allows. Sometimes I think about what would happen if he just disappeared. If there was an accident. If something happened that wasn't my fault but solved all my problems. August 2021. Met someone who makes me feel alive again. Who sees me as more than Eric's wife or the boy's mother. Who wants me. Not what I can provide or how I can serve. Just me. He asked if I'd leave Eric. I can't. The prenup. If I divorce him, I get nothing. But if something happened to Eric, if he died while we were still married, the business transfers to me, the properties, everything. I could be with someone who actually loves me, could build the life I deserve. The journals proved premeditation stretching back years. Proved Kouri had been fantasizing about Eric's death long before buying the first fentanyl pill. Proved this was calculated murder, not a crime of passion. But there was more. Evidence from people who'd known Kouri and Eric for years. Witnesses who remembered disturbing conversations. Katie testified about a conversation from 2020. Kouri asked me, very casually, like she was just making conversation, if something happened to Eric, who would get the masonry business? I told her it would go to Eric's estate, to be distributed according to his will. She asked how long that process takes. If there's a way to access assets immediately. I thought it was strange but didn't realize she was planning anything. Eric's sister Amy recalled Kouri asking about life insurance in 2021. She wanted to know how much the policies would pay out. If there was a difference between accidental death and natural causes. If the money comes faster with certain types of death. I told Eric about it afterward. He said Kouri was getting ideas and he needed to protect himself. Eric's business partner remembered a chilling conversation from January 2022. Kouri stopped by the office to talk to Eric. I overheard part of their argument. She said something like, "You're worth more to me dead than alive." Eric told her to leave. She laughed and said she was joking, but the way she said it, there was no humor in it. These weren't idle comments. These were research. Kouri gathering information, testing reactions. Planning. Mark Lewis, the Paramore prosecutors had protected for months, was finally identified in January 2026 when defense attorneys successfully argued his identity couldn't be hidden at trial. He'd been granted immunity in exchange for testimony. Took the stand looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Under oath, he admitted the affair began in July 2021. Admitted Kouri had talked about leaving Eric. Admitted she'd said Eric was the only thing standing between us and our future together. Did she ever discuss specifics about how Eric might die? The prosecutor asked. Mark hesitated. She talked about accidents. Said she'd been reading about people dying from allergic reactions, from heart attacks, from unexpected medical events. Said it was tragic when someone so young died suddenly. Did you think she was planning to kill her husband? I didn't want to think that. I told myself she was just fantasizing, venting. I never thought she'd actually. But you kept seeing her. Yes. Even after Eric died? Yes, for a few weeks, until I realized what she might have done. His testimony was devastating. Proved Kouri had been discussing Eric's death with her lover. Proved she'd been planning not just the murder but her life afterward. By February 2026, everything was ready. 3 years of investigation, thousands of documents, dozens of witnesses, forensic evidence tying every piece together. The trial would be held in Summit County District Court. Judge Richard McElvey presiding. Estimated duration, 4 weeks. 11 charges against Kouri Richins. First-degree aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, Valentine's Day, insurance fraud, attempting to change beneficiaries, insurance fraud, false claims after Eric's death, mortgage fraud, Midway Mansion, mortgage fraud, $250,000 helic, forgery, power of attorney documents, drug distribution, purchasing fentanyl, witness tampering, jailhouse letter, assault, attack on Katie, obstruction of justice. Additional 26 charges for mortgage fraud from 2021 would be tried separately. If convicted on all counts, life in prison without possibility of parole, plus 95 additional years for the other charges. Kouri pleaded not guilty to everything, maintained her innocence, told anyone who'd listen that she was being framed, that Eric had a drug problem she didn't know about, that his death was a tragic accident. Nobody believed her anymore. February 10, 2026. The trial began. As of now, January 2026, Kouri Richins sits in Summit County Jail. Cell 247. Maximum security wing. 23 hours a day in an 8 by 10 concrete box. 1 hour for recreation in a caged yard where she walks in circles alone. She's been there since May 8, 2023. 956 days and counting. Bail has been denied 4 separate times. Judge Richard McElvey ruled her a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. Specifically mentioned the assault on Katie. The walk the dog letter attempting to manufacture false testimony. The pattern of manipulation and violence. The defendant has shown she will stop at nothing to avoid accountability, McElvey wrote in his ruling, including witness intimidation, document destruction, and physical assault. She poses a clear and present danger to the community and to the integrity of these proceedings. So Kouri waits, in a cell that smells like industrial cleaner and desperation, wearing orange scrubs instead of the designer clothes she used to post on Instagram, eating food from metal trays instead of the restaurants she used to frequent. Her 3 sons haven't visited once. Katie won't bring them, says they're in therapy processing the truth about their mother, that seeing her would set back months of healing. The trial is scheduled to begin February 2026. For weeks estimated. Judge McElvey presiding. Jury selection starts February 3rd. Kouri faces 11 charges. Count 1, first-degree aggravated murder in the death of Eric Richins. Count 2, attempted aggravated murder, Valentine's Day 2022. Count 3, insurance fraud, attempting to change beneficiaries without authorization. Count 4, insurance fraud, filing false claims after Eric's death. Count 5, mortgage fraud Midway Mansion transaction. Count 6, mortgage fraud, $250,000 helic using fraudulent power of attorney. Count 7, forgery, falsifying documents. Count 8, drug distribution, purchasing, and possessing fentanyl with intent. Count 9, witness tampering, the jailhouse letter. Count 10, assault attack on Katie Richins Benson. Count 11, obstruction of justice. Additionally, prosecutors filed 26 separate charges related to mortgage fraud Kouri committed between 2019 to 2021. Those will be tried separately if she's convicted on the murder charges. If convicted on count 1 alone, life in prison without possibility of parole. If convicted on all counts, life without parole plus an additional 95 years to be served consecutively. Kouri has pleaded not guilty to everything, maintains her innocence, tells anyone who'll listen that Eric had a secret drug problem, that his death was a tragic accident, that she's being persecuted. Her defense team has filed dozens of motions trying to get evidence excluded. Motion to suppress Carmen Lauber's testimony, denied. Motion to exclude Eric's note predicting his murder, denied. Motion to suppress Google search history, denied. Motion to exclude the walk the dog letter, denied. Motion to exclude text messages to Paramore, denied. Motion to change venue due to pretrial publicity, denied. Motion to separate the charges into multiple trials, denied. Every single motion, denied. The evidence against Kouri is overwhelming. Prosecutors have built a case so comprehensive, so damning, that legal experts are calling it one of the strongest murder prosecutions in Utah history. Prenup giving Kouri nothing in divorce but everything if Eric died while married. $1.8 million in business debt. Making 100+ payments. Monthly financial collapse imminent in February 2022. Eric planning to file for divorce. Attorney meeting notes. Eric changed will in 2021, completely excluding Kouri. Means 3 separate fentanyl purchases from Carmen Lauber, documented with texts, checks, witness testimony. Kouri asked Carmen, "How much would kill someone?" Carmen testified. She said, "Give me double that amount." Final purchase of 40+ pills, enough to kill multiple people. Opportunity. Kouri made the Moscow Mule herself. Alone in the kitchen, Eric had no access to fentanyl pills on his own. Kouri's smartwatch proves she was moving around house during hours she claimed to be sleeping. 4-hour delay before calling 911. Physical evidence. Toxicology. 67 nanograms per milliliter fentanyl, 5x lethal dose, plus 16,000 nanograms per milliliter quetiapine, Kouri's sedative medication. Medical examiner ruled. Manner of death homicide. First responders noted. Did not appear CPR was performed due to blood that would have transferred. Digital evidence. Text to Paramore at 11:47 p.m. while Eric dying. "Love you baby." Google searches before Eric died. What is a lethal dose of fentanyl? How long does fentanyl take to kill? Google searches after Eric died. Luxury prisons for the rich in America. How to permanently delete information from iPhone. Deleted text messages recovered. If he could just go away, life would be so perfect. Text sent 2 days before Eric died. Life is going to be different, I promise. Hang in there until Friday. Eric died on a Friday. Behavioral evidence. Closed on mansion 22 hours after Eric died through celebration party. That same afternoon published children's book 1 year later portraying herself as grieving widow. Promoted book on TV. While under investigation stole Eric's gun safe and assaulted his sister when caught. Consciousness of guilt. The walk the dog jailhouse letter with detailed instructions for brother to commit perjury. Attempted to destroy evidence in Eric's safe lead about performing CPR. Proven false by blood evidence. Changed story multiple times about timeline that night. Eric's testimony from beyond the grave. Eric's handwritten note, dated January 15, 2022, 7 weeks before his death. Witnessed by his attorney. If anything happens to me, if I die unexpectedly or in circumstances that seem suspicious, please investigate Kouri. She has been trying to hurt me. The sandwich on Valentine's Day 2022 made me violently ill. I believe she put something in it. Years ago in Greece, I got severely sick after she gave me a drink. She wants me gone because of money, because I discovered she stole $250,000 from me, because I changed my will and cut her out, because I'm planning to file for divorce and the prenup means she gets nothing. I'm writing this because I'm genuinely afraid she's going to kill me. If I die unexpectedly, she did it. Please don't let her get away with this. Please protect my boys from her. Eric predicted his own murder, named his killer, then died exactly as he feared. Kouri's attorneys have previewed their defense in pretrial filings. They'll argue, Eric had a secret drug problem, self-medicating for stress. Kouri didn't know accidental overdose. Eric took pills himself. Didn't know how strong they were. No direct evidence. Nobody saw Kouri put fentanyl in the drink. Circumstantial case. Suspicious behavior doesn't equal murder. Alternative explanations. Every piece of evidence has innocent explanation. They'll attack Carmen Lauber's credibility. Point out she's a convicted drug dealer testifying for immunity. Suggest she's lying to save herself. They'll argue Eric's note was written under paranoia and stress. That he was wrong about Greece and Valentine's Day, just bad luck and allergic reactions he misinterpreted. They'll say the Google searches were Kouri researching because she was worried Eric might be using drugs. They'll claim the 4-hour delay was genuine shock and trauma, not calculation. They'll argue the mansion closing was just business. Kouri trying to save her company, not celebrating Eric's death. But legal experts say the defense has a nearly impossible task. This is one of the most comprehensive murder prosecutions I've ever seen, said Jennifer Walsh, criminal law professor at University of Utah. The prosecution has motive, means, opportunity, physical evidence, digital evidence, witness testimony, and the victim's own prediction of his murder. Defense would need to create reasonable doubt on every single piece. That's extraordinarily difficult. Robert Chen, former prosecutor who handled 47 murder trials, agrees. Eric's note is devastating. Juries are very moved by victims speaking from beyond the grave. Combined with everything else, the fentanyl purchases, the how much would kill someone question, the text message while he was dying. I don't see how defense overcomes this. February 3, 2026. Jury selection begins. Estimated 2 to 3 days. February 6, 2026. Opening statements. Prosecution lays out their case. Defense presents their theory. February 6 to 25, 2026. Witness testimony. Prosecutors will call Kouri Richins Benson, Valentine's Day phone call, Carmen Lauber, fentanyl sales, how much would kill someone, medical examiner, cause of death, toxicology, Detective Cartwright, investigation, evidence, Eric's attorney, will changes, note authentication, forensic analyst, Google searches, deleted texts, insurance companies, beneficiary change attempts, first responders, no CPR performed, 4-hour delay, the housekeeper who picked up final fentanyl purchase Eric's business partner, prenup, financial, situation, witnesses from the celebration party, the day after Eric died, the paramour, affair, texts about Eric being obstacle. Defense will call their own experts to counter. Character witnesses, possibly Kouri's mother and friends. The big question, will Kouri testify? Legal experts say no. Too risky. Prosecutors would destroy her on cross-examination. Ask about every lie, every inconsistency, every piece of evidence. But Kouri has shown repeatedly that she believes she's smarter than everyone else, that she can perform her way out of anything. She might insist on testifying against her attorney's advice. That could be the final mistake that seals her fate. February 26th to 27th, 2026. Closing arguments. Each side gets several hours to make their final case to the jury. February 28th to March 3rd, 2026. Jury deliberation. 12 people weighing the evidence. Deciding if Kouri Richins murdered her husband or if Eric died from a tragic accident. If convicted on count 1, first-degree aggravated murder, Kouri will spend the rest of her life in prison. No parole. No release. She'll die behind bars. If acquitted, she walks free. Returns to her 3 sons. Inherits nothing from Eric's estate due to his changed will, but faces no prison time. For Eric's family, justice for a man who predicted his own murder and was proven right. For Kouri, the difference between life in prison and freedom. For the 3 Richins boys, understanding what really happened to their father. National media will broadcast the verdict live. America will watch as 12 jurors announce whether they believe Kouri Richins is a murderer or a wrongly accused widow. Legal experts predict conviction on most if not all counts. The evidence is simply too strong. Eric's note alone, combined with Carmen's testimony about how much would kill someone, creates a narrative too powerful for defense to overcome. "I'd be shocked if she's acquitted on the murder charge," says Jennifer Walsh. The prosecution has built a case with multiple layers of corroboration. Even if you discount one or two pieces of evidence, the rest still proves guilt beyond reasonable doubt. But juries are unpredictable. All it takes is one holdout, one person who believes Kouri's story, one juror who thinks Eric really did have a secret drug problem. Kouri sits in her cell believing she'll be acquitted, tells other inmates the prosecution has nothing, that Eric was an addict, that she's innocent. Her attorneys know better. They've seen the evidence. They know what's coming, but they'll fight until the end. That's their job. That's justice. What the evidence proves. Look at everything together. Not individual pieces, but the complete picture. October 2020. Eric discovers Kouri stole $250,000. Starts protecting his assets. 2021. Eric changes his will, cuts Kouri out completely. Tells family he's worried. She'll kill him for money. January 2022. Eric writes note predicting his murder. "If I die unexpectedly, she did it." January 2022. Kouri purchases fentanyl from Carmen. First batch. February 2022. Kouri's business is collapsing. $1.8 million in debt, making 100+ payments monthly. Financial ruin imminent. February 11th, 2022. Kouri buys more fentanyl. Asks for stronger pills. February 14th, 2022. Valentine's sandwich. Eric nearly dies. Calls sister. "I think she poisoned me." February 15th, 2022. Kouri texts paramour. "If he could just go away. Life would be so perfect." February 27th, 2022. Kouri calls Carmen asking for fentanyl ASAP. Carmen testifies. Kouri asked, "How much would kill someone?" Kouri said, "Give me double that amount." February 28th, 2022. Final fentanyl purchase. 40+ pills. March 2nd, 2022. Kouri texts paramour. "Life is going to be different, I promise. Hang in there until Friday." March 3rd, 2022. Friday. Eric drinks Moscow Mule Kouri made. Contains 5x lethal dose of fentanyl plus Kouri's sedative medication.